thanks very much, Rob, for asking me to do this. We've named the subject the changing landscape of AMD treatments, and clearly, therefore, with it being on age-related macular degeneration, the ability to talk to such a large number of you from the Macular Society is wonderful. I have previously given talks in the Macular Society and other charities in the past on new treatments and innovation, and we've always found that people have found them very interesting and useful, and pleased to hear that there's a lot going on out there which may be currently available or may be available in the near future. So I hope you find this interesting. And to echo Rob's comments, we are going to be covering some questions that were pre-submitted at the end of the talk. But in addition, if you have any questions during the talk, please either hold on to them and ask them at the end using the chat function, or feel free to just type them into the chat area, which is at the side of the bar, and we'll do our very best to cover as many of those that we can. So a little bit of background about me. I'm a consultant ophthalmologist my NHS base is at King's College in London. I'm also the Deputy Medical Director of a private clinic called the London Lauriston Clinic, which is in central London. And that's my sort of major clinical role. Obviously, I work with OcuPlan, who are the co-sponsors of tonight's evening, but I also have other roles within innovation and new sort of therapeutic development. So I'm the lead for clinical innovation in ophthalmology at SolveMed, which is an artificial intelligence company, AI company, looking at ocular biomarkers and the risk of certain diseases. And also work with a group called Panacea Innovation, which is a group that tries to help clinicians or lab researchers who have ideas for new treatments and take these treatments from the lab to actually into companies and then into clinical practice, so that ultimately they can be of benefit to patients. So I hope that positions me well for tonight's talk. And my interests, I'm a general ophthalmologist, as we all are. So I do many procedures such as cataract surgery and the like, but also have a specialist interest in the retina. And the retina you can see a photo of in the top left corner of the screen there. And beneath it, that black and white cross-sectional scan is called an OCT of the retina. And I both manage medical retinal problems such as age-related macular degeneration, but also surgical diseases of the retina, things like retinal detachment, macular hole, and epiretinal membrane. And as I said, I have a particular interest in novel therapeutics and artificial intelligence. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about age-related macular degeneration, and I'm well aware that there's going to be a wide range of knowledge in the audience. I think there are some people who may have no eye disease whatsoever. There are others who have eye diseases which might not be AMD. There are other people with AMD, and that might form the majority. But for that reason, there will be a sort of variation in knowledge. So in order to put some of the later aspects of this talk, the treatments, into context, I'm going to be as I say, giving a bit of an overview on age-related macular degeneration. And that'll be the first part of the talk. I'll then talk about the current treatments, then the future treatments that are coming available, and then we'll have the Q&A. So what is age-related macular degeneration? It's a very wide phrase, and there's a lot of different pathology which falls under this umbrella. And it's a bit like thinking about somebody who has cardiovascular disease. That can be very mild with just high blood pressure, which is very well managed with one medication. But cardiovascular disease can also be very severe. So just like that, with that macular degeneration, you can see all of these photographs here of the retina represent patients who have different severity of disease. So on the right-hand side, as you're looking at the screen, you can see a picture of the back of the eye with lots of yellow specks and dots, and they're called drusen. And actually that patient there may have very good vision. Whereas on the top left of the screen, there's a photo with a big area of the retina missing, like it looks like a planet almost. And that's when the retina and the supporting layer of the retina has actually died away and become atrophic. And that can give very severe vision loss. And then there are other elements of disease. For example, you can see in some of the photographs in the middle where there's actually blood present at the back of the eye. And that's another type of macular degeneration called wet AMD, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment. So you can see there's a broad spectrum in what's out there, and all of these things affect you in different ways and also have very different treatments. And the vision in macular degeneration can vary from being able to see all the way down the chart, as you might in the top left of the screen. You may have distorted vision, as depicted in the two photographs of the family there, or at the bottom of the screen, you see the girl with the area where the central vision is starting to become blurred, and it can get more severe than that. Now, it's very rare to become completely blind from macular degeneration, but in the severe element of the disease, you can end up with the severe, the central vision being very severely affected, and you can't really see faces or facial expressions very well. So AMD is very common, and by 2040, it's expected to affect 288 million people worldwide, which is a huge number of people. And we're seeing more and more of these cases, partly due to the aging population, and also because we're getting better at picking up these sorts of problems with the scans that are often performed in optometry practices. And it's classified usually on the way we see its clinical appearance and also on the scans and the imaging. And two very characteristic examples are shown here on the left-hand side of the page. So at the top, you have what we call dry macular degeneration. And this is the most common type of macular degeneration. And 90% of people with AMD have this type of AMD. And in the early stages, it can be very mild and hardly affect the vision at all, as I mentioned earlier. But dry AMD can actually get worse and remain dry and result in those atrophic changes that I showed you before, where the cells just die off. And as I'll talk about later in this presentation, there isn't a huge amount that currently we've been able to do for that. The other main type of age-related macular degeneration is wet AMD, or neovascular AMD, as it's also sometimes known. And this is 10% of the cases, so the minority overall, but actually the majority that we see in the hospital. And this is where abnormal blood vessels have grown underneath the retina and have bled and leaked fluid. So it's like having water or blood on the film of your camera. And this can cause rapid and often severe vision loss. So this is a very often rapidly presenting problem, but conversely, we actually have some treatments for it. Although it's important to recognize that even with treatment, the vision doesn't tend to go back to how it was before the problem had happened. Now, why do people get macular degeneration? Well, there's lots of different causes. We know that there's a strong hereditary element, so your genetics. We know that people with what we call oxidative stress and also environmental issues such as smokers are more likely to get this condition. We also know that inflammation and ischemia, so poor blood supply to this area, are responsible. But the important thing to recognize is there's lots of different reasons why you might get it. And that is one of the reasons why this has been quite a challenging disease to tackle. We quite often get asked if someone has dry macular degeneration, what the chances are of them developing wet AMD. And a recent study in the United States showed that depending on the severity of your dry macular degeneration, there's anywhere between a 2 and 7% chance of developing wet AMD over about 3 years. So it is quite common, and it's important to monitor your disease, which I'll come on to later. I have one slide on wet macular degeneration because that isn't going to be the focus of tonight's talk, but I wanted to just pop it in just for completeness. Anybody out there with wet AMD will be aware that we treat that condition with injections into the eye, as is shown in the schematic diagram in the top left. And the two main drugs for this are Lucentis and Eylea. But there's actually others which have come on the market quite recently. And this is quite an interesting area of research. But as I say, this is beyond the scope of tonight's talk, but it's just there to show you that we do have some treatments for wet macular degeneration. And we're going to focus on dry AMD. Now, in the UK, this is currently the gold standard management for somebody who has dry macular degeneration. So you get told to take some vitamins, which are known as the AREDS 2 formula vitamins. And these vitamins have been shown in some studies to potentially reduce the risk of your macular degeneration getting worse. But the study evidence is quite weak. And for that reason, the NHS doesn't actually fund these vitamins and patients have to buy them themselves over the counter. We also recommend people have a diet rich in leafy vegetables, and you've got a lovely selection of asparagus, kale, broccoli, and what have you there in the middle. So that's something else which we recommend because that's thought to be mildly protective. And for those of you who have macular disease, you may be familiar with the grid on the right-hand side of the screen. It's like a piece of graph paper, and we call this Amsler grid. And that is something we give to patients to monitor their disease at home, because often we see them, we note some mild disease which we can't really do much about, but importantly, we want them to report if there's any change. And by looking at this grid with one eye at a time, once a week or so, one can tell if there's a change in how straight those squares look or if there are areas of the grid missing, and then report that to your optician or ophthalmologist. So this is a way of monitoring your disease and reporting it if necessary. And that's really all we've had for a very long time. But I'm going to tell you about what is happening in the future. And actually, there's a lot of very interesting research going on, and actually some treatments which are pretty close to market, if not at market at the moment. Now, just to be clear, I just want you to understand that we're going to be talking a bit about drusen, which is the left-hand side picture, which are these speckles at the back of the eye. And then also a little bit about atrophy, which is where the cells have died away. And you can see that that's a blown up photo of the photo I showed you on an earlier slide. And you can see that scallop-shaped area with all the lines across it. And that's where the cells have actually died away, and the vision there would be very severe. So I want you to just remember those pictures if you can. Now, we had a lot of questions about light therapy submitted to us. And the reason for this is that it's been all over the news lately. And this is also known as photobiomodulation, or PBM. So you may have heard it in different guises. And this article was in the Telegraph, as you can see, on the 8th of March 2024, first treatment for macular degeneration now available in the UK. And there was quite a lot of interest on radio as well about this. So Radio 4 had a big feature on it, and it's been in a number of other publications and the newspapers. So I wanted to give a bit of an overview about this, what it is, and what it sort of means. And this is the machine that is being talked about. So the manufacturer is called Lumithera, and the machine is called the Veleda machine. And you can see a picture of it there. It's about a foot or so tall and about the same wide, just a little bit less wide, half a foot wide. And basically it sits on a table and you look into that machine. Now, how does it work? What happens here is actually light is delivered to the back of the eye, and that's why it's called photobiomodulation. It's 3 different lights of different wavelengths, 590, 660, and 850 nanometers. And it's delivering this light energy to the retina. And what we think is going on here is that the different light levels are stimulating the mitochondria. And this is a picture of some mitochondria on the right-hand side. And the mitochondria are responsible for energy production. And we know that that's hugely important in the retina, because the retina is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the whole body, because it's constantly processing light signals to send to the brain. And we also know that the light that's being delivered by this machine actually has an inhibitory effect. So it reduces the likelihood of cell death and inflammation in the eye. So it sort of comes at things with a multi-pronged approach. And this device has a UKCA and CE marking. So it is available now in the UK. Now, the reason it jumped to popularity recently was because of a recent publication, and it was called the LightSight 3 study. And this was a study that was performed in the United States at 10 leading centers. And the names listed here are real, giants in the world of retina in the US. And it was a very well designed study, which was double masked, randomized, sham controlled. And what that means is that some patients were getting the treatment and others weren't getting the treatment. And you can see here how the study was designed. So there was a group who were the green line group, and they were getting PBM, so they were getting the light therapy. But there was also the sham group, so they were still staring into the machine. They didn't know if they were having the treatment or not, but actually no energy was being delivered. And in this way of designing a trial, we're able to determine whether or not there is a difference between the treatment and not receiving the treatment. And the way it worked was patients attended for 9 treatment sessions over 3 to 5 weeks. And they did that 4 times within 1 year. And then there was a month 13 analysis of the data. And then they had 2 more cycles of 9 sessions over a month. And then at month 21 was the final visit analysis. So this was the way the study was designed, and it was for patients who had early to intermediate dry AMD. So mostly patients who had drusen were recruited into this study. Now, here you have a graph, and I've put this up to just give you an idea of the results. The green line is patients who received the treatment, whereas the yellow line are the patients who didn't receive the treatment. And so by comparing the 2 lines, we can see the difference in the vision in the 2 groups. The higher up on the page you are, the better the vision was at the end of the study compared to the start. And what you see here is that the green line is above the yellow line, and it's significantly above the yellow line. And they did a lot of clever statistics to look into this and found that at each time point from month 13 onwards, there was a statistically significant improvement in the vision in patients receiving the light therapy compared to those who didn't receive the light therapy. And then if we look in a bit more detail, there were actually some patients improved by over 15 letters on the chart, which is 3 lines of the chart. So about 6% of patients had an over 3-line benefit at the end of 24 months, which is really quite an impressive amount, whereas there were none in the no treatment group. And similarly, you can see with 1-line or 2-line gain, 5 and 10 letter gains, that there was a significantly better gain in vision in those who received the treatment. But we know it's not all about vision. It's also about whether or not the disease is progressing. And there was quite a lot of imaging analysis done of these patients, and we found those who had the treatment had less progression of their disease than those who didn't have the treatment. And the changes were fairly, small between the groups, but they were enough to show a significant difference. So on the basis of this, the conclusion is that the data from this 24-month study is quite encouraging. It appears that there's reduced progression of the disease, which is important. And also there's a trend towards having better vision if you have this treatment. It's quite labor intensive for patients. So you have to come in 9 times over the course of 3 or 4 weeks. Clinics are tending to do this on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 3 consecutive weeks, and then having repeat cycles of treatment, sort of 3 months intervals, 3 months down the line. It's too early to tell if this is going to become adopted by the NHS, and that is because more data is required. And the company who make this machine are performing more studies, and of course they will take time to report. And then on the basis of these study results, the National Institute for Clinical and Health Excellence, NICE, will perform a cost-benefit analysis and look at all of the data, and that's how it would be decided whether or not it would be available for use on the NHS. So I think that decision is a fair way away, but this is available in private practice, and people will find that there are clinics offering this. And the rough cost, you know, if you look for it, is around about the £1,600 mark for a cycle. So it's available and it's out there, but at the moment, the jury is still out about whether or not this will be available on the NHS. The next part, I'm going to talk about are drugs in the pipeline. So this table is from a paper last year by Gergis, and I don't expect you to read all of the text, but the reason I put this up, and there's 2 slides, these 2 tables show you all the studies that are going on in dry macular degeneration to try and find new treatments, okay? And the treatments are looking at different areas of different potential avenues for managing this condition. And that ranges from reducing toxic byproducts to modulating the visual cycle, anti-inflammation drugs, protecting the nervous tissue, we call that neuroprotection, gene therapy, which a number of you will have heard about, and also cell-based therapies, which includes stem cell treatment. Now, I'm going to touch on a few of these because, again, there were a few questions about some of these medications. Now, a hot topic has been these 2 drugs, Syfovre and Izervay, and these were licensed by the FDA for patients with atrophic macular degeneration. So you remember that picture which was on the right-hand side of the screen earlier. And in the USA, they're available for use. And they were licensed last year. But the European Medicines Agency did not approve them. And so they're not available in the EU or the UK at the moment. Now, we don't know whether or not that decision is going to stay that way, because I believe the companies are appealing the decision. But the main reason for that happening was because there were some concerns about the treatment in terms of potential inflammation that the treatment was causing. And also there were some concerns about whether or not these treatments of dry macular degeneration were increasing the risk of developing wet macular degeneration. And although the study results showed that there was a reduction in the progression of the degeneration at the back of the eye, there was actually no improvement in the vision. And that was the real base reason why the EMA didn't approve these drugs. But it's a watch this space situation, because that might change. They're given by intravitreal injections, so injections into the eye, as you can see there, through the white of the eye. But it's something which might change in the future, so might become available. Gene therapy is a very exciting area that is using genetic material to treat the disease. So that can be DNA, which is the information on your chromosome, or RNA, which is the code that that DNA produces to translate into the proteins that are made. And the big benefit with gene therapy is that we can be very targeted with what we're trying to inject into the eye at the tissue of relevance. So instead of just injecting it as a liquid into the center of the eye, we place these medicines underneath the retina using surgery, and then we use a virus to basically translocate the material into the cells, and then they start producing whatever the protein that is coded for by the gene that we've inserted. And one of the major benefits here is that this is a one treatment only potential, rather than the multiple injections that one might need. However, the surgery itself is quite invasive. Vitrectomy surgery, which I do a lot of, carries a bit more risk than having just injections. And there are also challenges with some of the surgical technique. But we do actually have a gene therapy in this country for a different condition called Lux-Turner. And that means that the proof of concept is out there. And I think it's only a matter of time before we do have some gene therapy solutions for more common diseases such as dry AMD. And the idea is that as the treatment gets safer to give, hopefully we can intervene earlier and help people who have early disease and stop it progressing. Briefly, stem cell therapy. This is very early research, and this is taking stem cells from human embryonic cells, bone marrow stem cells, and trying to convert those into the cells which have been lost at the back of the eye. And there's lots of different ways of inserting them into the eye. And at the moment, this is very much in the trial phase. So it's not something that's available, in the clinics, but there's a lot of promise, and there's a large US study going on at the moment, which is going to be reporting in 2029. The last thing I'm going to talk about, because we're getting close to my half an hour, is the telescopic intraocular lens, which I've been lucky to be involved with for a number of years. I presented on this subject at the American Academy of Ophthalmology. And I know that you had a recent webinar on this with the Macular Society, but I just wanted to mention it for completeness. And what is very important about this technology is that, different to everything I've spoken about so far, this has no effect on the underlying macular degeneration process. So it's not going to stop the disease progressing. But what it does is it uses clever optics to magnify your vision and improve your vision in that way. Now, my penultimate slide is actually a video. So a little bit like the football results on the BBC News, if you don't want to see the video, then now's the time to look away. And I'm going to start it, and it's going to be 2 minutes. So for those who don't want to watch and look away, I'll let you know when the video is finished. So we'll start it now. And this is a video of the telescope being injected into the eye. Now you can see here that this patient has a cataract, and that big bright yellow area, which is the lens, has lots of opaque areas, and that's the cataract. And we're doing various markings here which are all part of the surgical technique. You don't need to worry too much about these, but it's just to give you an idea about what we do. And we do a standard cataract operation to put these lenses in, and then we get ready to insert the intraocular lens. Now, unlike a normal cataract, these lenses that are going in, compared to normal lenses after cataract surgery, are far larger. And therefore, we have to enlarge the wound. And you can see here a instrument enlarging the entry point through the cornea, which is the clear part of the front of the eye. We then prepare the lens for its insertion, and we do that with a jelly-like substance, which you can see being used here. And then it's the injection of the lens itself. So here you have the surgeon holding up the cornea and pushing the inserter into the eye. And now very slowly, we inject the lens, and you can see it starting to flop out. It has 3 black wings, and we very gradually inject this into the eye, and then it comes to rest inside the old lens capsule bag, as you can see there. And this patient's awake, no pain during this procedure. And as I say, the lens is implanted in the same position that a normal lens would be implanted during cataract surgery. We do a few more bits and pieces to help with the pressure in the aftermath of the operation. And then we close the eye with 3 or 4 stitches. And that picture there is how the eye looked on day 1. So you can see everything looks good. You've got the telescope in the middle and the stitches at the top. And we put one of these in one of the 2 eyes, and we found patients have found this quite beneficial in magnifying the images. And there's been hundreds of these done now worldwide, and there's currently a lot of interest in them in Europe and the US, and they've gradually started to come to the UK too. So I'll pop that in just for a bit of interest. So that's the end of the video for those who didn't want to see it. So in conclusion, I hope I've given you a bit of an appetite of what we currently have, what's on the horizon, both in the near horizon and also the very far horizon. I think the key thing is to have a regular eye check. And if you are diagnosed with one of these conditions, to be aware of it. And if there is anything that's available at that stage, of course, that can be done. The next thing is, if you have any new symptoms, that you must report those early, because we know that if we catch patients early and we treat problems early, then the outcomes are better. So reporting new symptoms early really is critical. And maintaining an interest in your condition is critical. And really, you know, we really encourage people. It's fantastic that you've joined this webinar tonight, because when we see people in clinic, if they have an understanding of what's out there or what they might need, it really helps us to tailor the consultation. And of course, there are ways of doing that with being involved with trials and then having access to the newest treatments. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll move on to the Q&A now, Rob, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Wonderful, James. That was really great and incredibly informative. So thank you for that, and I hope everybody that has attended found that as interesting as I did, because I thought that was really great. So as we mentioned at the start, there were a few common questions, and we've grouped them together in the interest of time, really, because we think that answering these 5 questions will cover the majority. We've had a few questions come in as well over the past half hour, and we'll try and run through them as well if we have time. But the first question that we're going to put to you, James, is how do I get involved with clinical trials?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, and it's something we do get asked a lot. The most important thing is, if you have an eye condition and you're seen at the hospital, or indeed by your optometrist, is to let them know that you would potentially be interested in being on a trial. Now, the trials that I've spoken about often recruit quite, you know, different groups of patients. So your individual disease characteristics would potentially be matched to certain trials. And of course, you can't be out there and, you know, be applying for these individual trials yourself. The best thing to do is to register your interest with your local hospital. And often there are trials units which the Macular Society can point you towards. And then when something does come available, it's wonderful if we have a group of patients that we can immediately approach and say, look, this is now available. We think you might have the characteristics to be included in this. And then, you know, it's a fantastic way of being able to join the trial and being ahead of the game. So I think that's the main thing, is registering with your local eye unit and letting others know that you would be interested in joining a trial.
Wonderful. The next question is around cataracts and AMD, and we had quite a few questions where people who are living with both cataract and AMD. But the question is, I've got a cataract and AMD. What implications are there in terms of risk and potential benefits of having cataract surgery?
Yeah, another great question. I do a lot of cataracts in patients who also have age-related macular degeneration, both dry and wet. The long and short of it is that the vast majority of patients can have cataract surgery even if they have macular degeneration, because we know that cataract surgery in the vast majority of cases will improve the vision. Now, the amount of visual improvement obviously depends on the severity of the macular degeneration, but we do find that even, you know, if you have mild macular degeneration, there are huge benefits to be had from having cataract surgery if you have a significant cataract. And similarly, even if you have quite advanced macular degeneration, we know that patients report much brighter vision, the colors being brighter, the peripheral vision being a lot clearer. And these things make a huge difference to quality of life. So my answer really is that if you have AMD and a cataract, you certainly should explore having your cataract done if it is offered to you.
Brilliant. The next question is, when having injections, how long am I going to have them for, and are they lifelong?
Yeah, another common question. So the injections, we're talking here about wet age-related macular degeneration. Now, usually these medications are given once a month for a few months, and then they're given every other month after that. And the number of injections really depends on the response to the injection. So if you have a very good response to the injections, you might end up having 7 or 8 in the course of 1 year, and then potentially another 4 in the second year, and then potentially no more injections. However, that is one group of patients who respond well. There are also a group of patients who respond but need to continually have more injections, otherwise their disease reactivates. And I do have some patients who've actually had over 100 injections in both eyes. So it is something which is hugely variable, and it depends on the disease severity and how you respond and how the monitoring goes of your treatment. But we don't tend to say they would be lifelong, whereas something like glaucoma, for example, if you end up on glaucoma eye drops, often those eye drops do have to be given lifelong. So it tends not to be as long as that, but sometimes people do need these injections for a very considerable amount of time.
Great. The next question is around anti-VEGF treatments, and I think this was another pretty common one. But is there any difference in the different brands of anti-VEGF treatments?
Yeah. So this again is relating to wet macular degeneration, and for many years we've had two different types of drug, well, two drugs. One is called Lucentis, people have heard of, and the other one is called Eylea, and they're made by different drug companies. For all intents and purposes, they are fairly similar in terms of their efficacy, so how well they work. We do know that sometimes if you've been on one drug and it stops working that well, that we can switch drugs, and actually that can have an improvement in how you respond to that medication, and actually even switching back if the drug that you've been switched onto hadn't worked has been shown to offer some benefit. Most of the time, the decision for which of those drugs is made by the clinician and by the departments that they're given at. But interestingly, and we didn't cover this in the talk, but there are some new drugs that are becoming available for wet macular degeneration. And, you know, I think as we go on, a bit like I said, there's a lot in the pipeline for dry AMD. There's also a lot in the pipeline for wet macular degeneration, and in particular, treatments that maybe give slightly longer lasting results than what we currently have, which are given on a monthly or a 2-monthly basis. But broadly speaking, you know, the drugs act in a fairly similar way, or certainly those that are available at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And then the final sort of pre-prepared question that we had this evening was, where can I get more information about AMD?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information around. When you're diagnosed with macular degeneration, it's good practice that the ophthalmologist or the optician should provide you with some literature, like a leaflet about it. And there are some very useful leaflets often provided by the pharmaceutical companies about these conditions. But the Macular Society is a fantastic source of information for this because it's written in a non-biased way. It's deliberately aimed at patients with these conditions, and it gives a very good overview. So I direct my patients to the Macular Society website, because there's also, as with any information on the internet, some slightly dubious ideas about what can be done. So it's best to stick to genuine sources. And I think, you know, the Macular Society is at the forefront of what's going on and is a very good place to start when it comes to looking for information.
That's brilliant. Thank you, James. So we have actually had a few more questions in the chat room function as well. So I think we have a little bit of time, so we're going to try and cover a couple of them. So the first one is around AREDS2, and is Nutrof similar to AREDS2?
I'll have to have a look at Nutrof. I know that it's a supplement, and it would depend exactly what is in Nutrof. It's not something which I recommend for my patients. And there are a lot of brands of supplements and vitamins out there. The key thing is ensuring that the vitamins that you're taking are those that are in the AREDS2 formulation. And they are lutein, zeaxanthine, zinc, and then the vitamins C and E. So there's a lot of varieties out there, a lot of marketing is done, but the key is to identify those from the AREDS2 formulation, because that is the formulation that was used in the trials, which showed the benefit of it.
That's great. And I think that covers one of the points that someone else made as well, where they were asking if it's advantageous to take lutein and xanthium. So that covers that one as well, which is great. There's been a question around the price of light therapy, and I don't know if you can answer this, James, but the question is whether it's cheaper than injections when paying privately for that.
So it depends. That's the answer. Firstly, bear in mind that the light therapy is for dry macular degeneration, whereas the injections are for wet macular degeneration. So it's not like you're in a restaurant and you're choosing between two options here. Overall, the injections probably are more expensive over the course of a year. But again, it depends on the type and the frequency of the injection, whether or not you're having it in both eyes, for example. Whereas the light therapy would probably come out a little bit cheaper. And of course, it depends where you're having it done. Of course, the injections are available in the NHS, whereas the light therapy isn't. So there's a lot of variables in terms of cost. But broadly speaking, yes, I would say the light therapy would come out as cheaper than injection treatment. But just recognize that it is for different conditions.
Yeah, okay, that's really good to know. The next question is Lumathera Valeda available privately?
Yes, it is. So it's approved by the regulatory authorities. It has a UKCA CE marking, and it's available in a number of private clinics and opticians, actually. So it is possible to find places which offer it for you. It's best to usually find somewhere nearby because there's quite a few visits, and then you can inquire as to whether or not it's something that you'd like to explore.
Okay, all right, that's really good. The next couple are around cataract. The first comment was from Margaret, who said that she had 2 cataract ops while having dry AMD, and it was all good. So that's really good news, Margaret, that it's all worked out. That is brilliant. And I'm just scrolling down here to see the other one around cataract. If somebody already had cataract surgery, can they have telescopic intraocular lens operation?
That is a great question, actually, and something which, as ophthalmologists, we'd be debating a lot, because in order to do that, when you've had your cataract surgery in the past, you've had an artificial lens placed inside your eye, and to switch that lens for a telescope lens is quite a challenging procedure to do. Now, it's not really available to have that done because of the risks involved with the operation. Although there are plans to launch a study to see if there are scenarios where it could be possible, because we're well aware that people, that Elaine is referring to here, have had their cataract surgery and might be interested in having a telescopic lens. And so there is this group of patients, but at the moment it tends to be patients who've not had cataract surgery who would be eligible for that. But it's a watch this space and inquire about it, because it's something that might change in the future. Okay.
Next question is light therapy an option if you have dry AMD and glaucoma?
Yeah, I don't see glaucoma as a contraindication or a reason why you cannot have the light therapy. So if you have dry macular degeneration and you'd like to proceed with the light therapy, then that can be done. It shouldn't have an impact on the pressure in the eye, and therefore it shouldn't impact the glaucoma.
Okay, that's great. We've had one comment around where to buy AREDS 2 in the UK, and then straight after that, it looks like it's been answered by someone else on the call that says Vitize 2 from Butterflies Healthcare complies with AREDS 2, and that's something that we can agree with as well. We know Vitize 2 and Butterflies Healthcare quite well, and you can certainly get the AREDS 2 tablets from there. Thank you. I don't know whether that's Mr. or Mrs. Brown, but they've just put a link in there as well to that, which is great. Thank you. Bear with me. I think there was maybe one more that I think we could answer.
I would just say on that note, Boots or a mainstream pharmacy is a great place to go to ask about this, because the pharmacist will direct you to the correct medications. Sometimes on the internet there are things which might not be as advertised or be what you're expecting. Clearly this one from Butterflies Healthcare is very good, but there are others which might not, have the exact nutrients that we think are the best for you.
Yeah, that's great. And then finally, if we stay on that topic of the supplements, with regards to both wet and dry AMD, are there any supplements that you would recommend for wet AMD, or is it the same really, whether you're living with dry and wet? It's still the AREDS 2 that you're looking to?
Yeah, so actually the studies on these vitamins showed the best effect on patients who had intermediate disease in one eye and advanced disease, i.e. potentially wet AMD in the other eye. And the benefit was in reducing the chance of your good eye developing the wet macular degeneration. So I think overall, it's something to ask your healthcare professional when you see them, whether or not they would be useful for you. But in reality, I think if you are interested in taking these medications, they're highly unlikely to cause you problems. So, wet or dry, there may be some effect, but don't expect it to be a magic solution which is going to prevent any deterioration or prevent your sight worsening, because sadly, that isn't the case with these medications. They really, the evidence is on the weak side.
Okay. I think that's pretty much all the questions, James. That was incredibly helpful. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
If there are any other questions that people have after this, please feel free to send them to the support email address that we have, and we'll try to be as helpful as we can. But yeah, thank you, James. That was really great.
Great. Thanks, Rob.
So what I'd like to do now is to, if I pin myself, bear with me, for everyone. And I'm going to share my screen as well. Hang on a second. Hopefully everybody can see that. I'd like to just really quickly give an overview of who OcuPlan are. I know that many of you may already be familiar with OcuPlan. We have been on a few of these Macular Society webinars, and we've been a partner with Macular Society for quite a while. So you may be familiar with who we are, but I think it's worth giving you a really quick overview of who OcuPlan are, who we help, and why we were set up, really. So OcuPlan, we're still a relatively new business. We were set up in 2019 by a chap called Dan Calladine. Dan is a leading consultant ophthalmologist in the UK, and Dan recognised through working both private and in the NHS that there was a certain cohort of people that could probably have been better served in eye care, and that weren't really getting the care that they needed, and felt that there needed to be a bit of a solution there that could help those people to get really high quality consultant-led eye care. And that's why Dan set OcuPlan up. Like I said, we're 5 years old. We now have about 500 opticians and 100 consultants all over the UK. And it's really a shared care platform where people with long-term eye conditions such as glaucoma and AMD can get the care that they need by visiting an optician for all the scans, and then seeing a consultant in person to get the feedback and advice that they need from a consultant ophthalmologist. And it's these type of people that are living with these conditions that aren't quite getting the care that they need, where they really should be seeing a consultant at least once every 12 months. And it felt like there needed to be a solution, because it was those people that weren't quite getting that care regularly enough. We've been partnered with Macular Society for about 1.5 years, and it's a really wonderful partnership that we've got that's incredibly useful for us, and we're very, very well aligned in terms of the goals that we have in terms of looking to preserve people's vision and ultimately helping to end avoidable sight loss. So it's a really great partnership that we've got with them, and we're hoping to continue that for as long as we can. In terms of the patient choices and how OcuPlan sits in, and the reason that OcuPlan really was set up was because we saw that there were faults in the current choices that patients had, whereby there's the NHS, and we know that within the NHS that they are underfunded and understaffed, and there's not really much they can do about it. It's across all areas of healthcare, but unfortunately, when people are needing to be seen, there are quite regularly delays. And the alternative to that was traditional private care, which is expensive. It's expensive for the majority of people. And that's really why OcuPlan was set up, to try and bridge that gap between the NHS and traditional private care and provide cost-effective, accessible care for the people that need it. So that's where OcuPlan fits in terms of the care options that people have. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the new remote service that we're launching quite soon. Now, when we look at how we adapt our service and we improve OcuPlan, we always start with speaking to people who are living with the conditions. We speak to professionals as well to understand what can be solved, where are the issues. And we've had we're fortunate enough to have attended quite a few of the focus groups within Macular Society. And they've been incredibly helpful for us because of the feedback and the honesty that we get from the people that are in the room. And a lot of the feedback is pretty common, and I'll read a bit of it out. That I wasn't told that I have AMD until it's too late. I was told that I had some age-related changes at the back of my eyes. I was never told that it could potentially lead to sight loss. Nobody provided me with advice on how to monitor or look for the signs to look out for wet AMD. And I've never seen a consultant ophthalmologist. Now, that last one is really common in terms of never seeing a consultant ophthalmologist, because there's no real pathway for people with dry AMD. You're told you've got this condition, but then you're told to go and monitor at home. And what really helps with people, and the feedback that we get, is that they want peace of mind. They want peace of mind that their vision has been reviewed by an ophthalmologist, that they know the level of progression, that they know that someone has reviewed it and can provide feedback on their scans. And it's something that we really listened to and thought we should probably adapt a little bit what we're doing within our business. My light has turned off in here. It does that when there's no movement after a while. And we thought that we need to introduce something that can help people that are looking for that time with a consultant ophthalmologist cost effectively, which is leading to us introducing the remote service. So quite similar to what we do with our core service, which is in person. You see a consultant ophthalmologist. This is slightly different in that you see your optician for your scans. That is then sent to OcuPlan, to our consultant ophthalmologists, and you receive a report back from our consultant ophthalmologists, either over the phone or through email or in person. It's the peace of mind that people are looking for, that a consultant has seen it. We can be pretty quick in terms of turning around those reports, a comprehensive report that provides information on the progression of the condition, and that personalized advice as well that you get from that consultant ophthalmologist. We're very, very close to launching. It starts at £150. We're just putting the finishing touches to it. It's in the next few weeks that we're going to be launching this, but it's created for people that want that little bit of extra peace of mind and time with a consultant ophthalmologist. So how does it work? Really, really simple. You sign up over the phone. A letter is sent out to you. You visit your optician. Those scans that are done at the opticians are sent through to the consultant. They review the scans and then provide a report or a call or a visit within 10 days. So really, really simple. We're trying to make it as simple and as straightforward as we can. So pretty straightforward there. But yeah, as I said, we're launching quite soon. We've got a web page up there that explains a little bit more about how it works and who it's for and the benefits of it. We've got a bit of a priority access list that we've set up. And if it's something that you think would benefit you and you think you'd like time with a consultant ophthalmologist to review your scans, please visit that webpage that we've got there. I will put it in the messages if I can, the link. Can I do this? Bear with me. I can't do it from here. George, I don't know if you're able to pop that in the chat if you can. But there's a little form there that's the priority access list. So put your name and email address down and we'll keep you in the loop with the launch of that. And we'll let you know once it goes live. James, thank you. You put that in the chat now, so that's great. What we'll do when we send out the recording of this, we'll include that within there. So please feel free to have a quick look. So I think that pretty much concludes the session. What time are we on? I think we're almost perfectly on time there. We are perfectly on time. It's exactly 8 o'clock. Look at that. So yeah, we really hope that you've enjoyed this session and you found it useful. James, your talk was incredibly insightful and really useful. Thank you for that. And yeah, thank you to everybody that's attended. And look out for an email shortly. Yeah, we'll fire an email out to you. We've got one more question that says, does OcuPlan work with a hospital? Yes, we do. We've got around 100 consultants who work out of hospitals all over the UK. So please have a look at the website. You'll be able to find the consultants that we've got to see if there's anything there. All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone.